So it's been almost 1 month since we had any significant updates for Anthem, that unless of course you want to count the hotfix from a couple of weeks back, but in terms of actual new content, we had patch 1.04 on the 26th of March, and that was kind of it. We didn't have anything new since then, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who realizes this, but for quite a number of days now, the player count seems to have gone down by quite a lot. I'm constantly finding myself running out of people to match up with, be it in daily challenges or missions, but even worse, it's now starting to happen with strongholds as well. And you have to keep in mind that strongholds used to be the most popular type of content that people were still doing, and that one is starting to suffer as well. And it's most obvious during mornings in my region when I keep ending up in solo sessions with not a single person in sight. On Grandmaster 1 I still find things manageable, I still find players, but oftentimes on higher difficulties there's not a single other player I can find besides me. I've completed plenty of Grandmaster 2 and above contracts without having even a single person being queued up in my party for the better part of the past week, and it's starting to become a little bit worrying. Of course, it eventually fixes itself towards the evenings when more players get in the game, but it's undeniable that this is a symptom of what's currently going on with the game, with Bioware, and of course with the player base. If you check any metrics online, you don't need a Reddit poll or anything, just use good old Google Trends, you'll see that the game's popularity has gone down quite a lot since its launch 2 months ago, and yeah, now it's pretty much flatlined, so it doesn't look that bright. I'm not saying that this is unusual for a game to eventually stabilize lower than its initial peak, but in the case of Anthem, it went down much faster than normal, with much fewer upward trends, which means that the gamers are abandoning it in mass. In fact, this almost reminds me of No Man's Sky in a sense, to the point that the interest over time for both of these games after their initial failed releases follow almost the exact same pattern. The comparison with No Man's Sky is going to have a little bit more sense as this video goes on, so bear with me. For now, Bioware is pretty much facing a rather huge challenge, and I'm probably not the only one who realizes that Anthem's next update could very well be the one that either makes or breaks this game. Looking back at the past 2 months, outside of the few events and missions we got here and there, which were rehashed content to begin with, and type of content we have been doing since day one anyway, we didn't get anything new to do, so it's pretty much the same old stuff. Most of the big updates were in fact nothing more than, thousands of fixes that the game needed due to the poor state it's been released in. In terms of actual new content, this April update, which is due sometimes this week, is going to be the first one to ever bring something new that we haven't seen before. So obviously there's a lot of people right now being, eager to test it out, but others also very concerned about how it's going to be delivered and if it's going to live up to the expectations. Again, the challenge here for Bioware is maybe even threefold. First, this new sunken stronghold, which is going to come with the April update, has to be enticing enough to warrant players to come back, which I'm sure it will for a time, but will it be enough? That is the question. This brings me to the second point, and whatever this update may be, it needs to bring more to the table than just one single stronghold. There needs to be more than that, and not just because, Bioware needs to appease the mass of angry players, but also rather to respect the promise that they have made with the roadmap itself. And speaking of the roadmap, a lot of it hasn't been much respected in the past couple of months. This raises concerns if Bioware is even able to keep up with their own roadmap, or if it should be entirely scrapped, or maybe redesigned, or maybe being replaced with something else. The previous months unfortunately are now gone, so you can't find them on their website, but I can assure you many of the past events or promised content was neither delivered, or if it was, it was severely underwhelming, and even the rest of the content which did seem promising was pushed back in this update in April. The third point is of course regarding the current issues and concerns people still have with the game. Outside of the new content and outside of the bug fixes, some of the core mechanics still need to be overhauled. For now, the biggest culprit behind so many people's frustration remains the unrewarding loot system. No matter how you look at it, no matter how much luck you had with it in the past, the game has a loot problem that becomes even more evident when you drop even 5 minutes in the nearest competitor Anthem has and realize the number of quality of life changes that this game misses. Say what you will, but a recalibration mechanic and a way to reward players with more legendary gear would do wonders for this game. Moving forward though, I made a comparison with No Man's Sky, a game that at its worst was probably the most despised game of all time, even if only for a brief moment. Anthem isn't the first and most definitely won't be the last game to start at the highest heights due to hype and big budget marketing, only to later on drop on its belly. For those who forgot, until Fallout 76 and Anthem came around the block as the most hated examples and the embodiment of everything that is currently wrong with the gaming industry, we used to have a little thing called No Man's Sky. I've covered this game extensively on my channel and I've pretty much followed its development ever since its first footage was shown all the way back in 2014. I've seen it go from the most loved concept to the most hated release, all the way back to the biggest redemption in gaming in recent years. It didn't happen overnight, of course. It took at least a whole year and several very big updates to bring it up to par, but just like Anthem, it followed some very similar principles and patterns in the beginning days which guaranteed its failure. We had gaming companies biting more than they could chew, developers making promises they couldn't keep, lies about features that in reality never existed, and so on and so forth. Many times it happened for a very promising project to fall short a few months after its release simply because the studio behind it couldn't get themselves back on track, didn't listen to the feedback their fans would give, and even worse, would push through it with shitty attitudes. No Man's Sky did the complete opposite, and that is the reason why it's now so beloved. There's a few reasons why that game made a complete 180-degree turn from its dark days. The people over at Hello Games realized early on that through all of the anger and toxicity that they would rightfully deserve, they also got a lot of feedback in the process, and it's now still going strong and still having a healthy player base. What Bioware does from this point on will matter the most in the long run. There's no reason for them to not take a page from Hello Games' book. No matter how many promises Bioware will do that they won't abandon the game, if it doesn't make sense financially for them and for EA, eventually it will be put down, and this kind of concern was raised with Mass Effect Andromeda as well. Of course, the good news here is that Anthem doesn't seem to follow in Andromeda's footsteps, as in getting ghosted after a few patches, and instead there's quite a number of positions being opened to increase the team's size and capabilities, but on the feedback side is where Bioware is currently lacking. I know that many of the proposed solutions coming from the fan base sound very simple, like just flat out increasing job quality, but honestly many times the solutions to current problems don't have to be that complicated at all and could very well be, you know, just a flick of a switch away. If the vast majority of the games in a certain genre are doing a mechanic in a certain way, why go against the tide and waste time and money trying to reinvent the wheel when nobody asked you to? Bioware said that they don't want to straight up steal other people's ideas when asked about implementing Diablo's 3 loot system, which I find ironic coming from a company that spent almost a decade chasing a trend, half-assing it, and not even being able to keep up with its obstacles or changes. If Bioware does indeed hate or hated games like Destiny so much internally, they should have come up with a better product instead of a worse one, which is not something that happened. Finally, I also want to address Bioware's attitude towards, the recent feedback. It seems that the game's own community managers would rather spend their time talking about completely unrelated topics, and on the rare occasions they do answer something Anthem related, they either answer what they want to hear or give replies that literally bring no new information. I get it's their right to take a day off and talk about something else, nobody is denying that, but when they ignore questions on purpose on the simple fact that they're uncomfortable to answer, this is hard not to lash out to, and it's understandable why so many of the fans are, quote unquote, being toxic towards the developers. Bioware accused the fanbase of being toxic in the past, but I would argue that their passive-aggressive attitude is also just as toxic, if not even more. But again, I don't want to bash the developers, I don't want to make another rant video or anything. I've been accused of that in the past. It might not look like a big deal to a lot of people, but as I've said, a lot is dependent on the quality of this update. There needs to be a drastic shift in the quantity and quality of the updates that Bioware brings to the game. And here I'm not talking about just the bug fixes, but I'm also talking about sizable content that keeps players going and that is fun to play with. Anyway, to sum it all up, Bioware is now on pretty much borrowed time, and its next move could be, its only move left. The way they're choosing to communicate with the fans right now and taking feedback needs to severely change if they want to succeed. For now, I'm going to wait for the live stream tomorrow and report back with the newest, news and information about it. Hopefully it's going to be as sizable as a lot of you guys expected, because I know a lot of you have high expectations from this new update. On the other side, I know others are pretty much skeptical. Anyway, in the meantime, if you guys enjoyed this video, of course, a like and a subscribe would be super appreciated. And I'm going to see you guys in the next one, so peace out.